Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It started with a text message I nearly ignored. Could you stop by my place tonight? Need to talk. Martin. I stared at the screen for a good minute, blinking at the message, rereading it as if it would morph into something else. Martin, my husband's boss. A man I had spoken to dozens of times at company dinners and holiday parties, always polite, always reserved, never personal. The kind of man who commanded a room with just the weight of his silence. Why would he want to talk to me? It was already past 8. My husband, Kevin, was out of town for a conference. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you when you're alone for too long. I considered ignoring the message. I could just say I missed it, an easy excuse. But something pulled at me. Curiosity, maybe. Or the tone of the message. There was no explanation, no pleasantries, just that blunt request. And the fact that it was coming from someone so private made it feel urgent, unusual. I replied, "Okay, what time?" His response came almost instantly. "Now, if possible, just for a bit." I slipped into a light sweater and jeans, though I debated a bit longer than usual over what to wear. Not because I wanted to impress him, but because I wasn't sure what kind of conversation this would be. Serious? Formal? Emotional? Martin's house was only 10 minutes away. I'd been there once, years ago, during a holiday party. I remembered the grand staircase, the high ceilings, the echo of laughter and crystal glasses clinking. But tonight, the house looked nothing like that memory. It was quiet. The porch light was on, and through the window I saw a soft amber glow. I knocked lightly. The door opened almost immediately. He looked different. Not in any drastic way, but the sharpness he always carried with him, like a man wrapped in armor, was noticeably missing. His hair was slightly tousled, his shirt sleeves rolled up. There was a tiredness in his eyes that didn't match the man I knew. "Thanks for coming," he said, stepping aside. "Of course," I replied, walking in cautiously. "Is everything all right?" He gave a vague nod and motioned toward the living room. "Can I get you something? Tea? Wine?" "Tea's fine." I sat on the edge of the couch as he disappeared into the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of whatever music he had playing in the background. Jazz, maybe. Something mellow and slow. He returned with 2 cups of tea, handing me one before sitting across from me. He didn't speak immediately, and I didn't push. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just expectant. He finally exhaled, a long breath that felt like it had been trapped in his chest for years. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he said. I blinked. Thinking about what? You. The word landed in the room like a dropped glass. I didn't speak. I wasn't even sure I understood. "I know how that sounds," he added quickly, lifting a hand. "And I'm not here to complicate anything. It's just, I've watched you over the years. Not in a creepy way," he said, shaking his head. "Just noticed." Set my tea down. My heart was moving a bit faster now, not out of fear, but confusion, and maybe something else I didn't want to name yet. "You're kind," he continued. "You listen. When you talk to someone, they feel like they matter. I see how you look at Kevin, how you support him even when he's being stubborn. And I guess I wanted to know what that kind of presence feels like when it's directed at me, even just for a night." He looked up, his eyes searching mine. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to stand up and leave. But I didn't. Because something about his voice, about the way he said just for a night, didn't feel like a proposition. It felt like a confession, a quiet yearning. "I'm sorry if I've overstepped," he said softly. "I just needed to say it to someone. And you seemed like the safest place to land." I nodded slowly. The room felt warmer suddenly. Or maybe it was just my skin. "I'm not angry," I said finally. "Just surprised." "I thought you might be." There was a long pause before I asked, "Why tonight?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I got news from my doctor today. My heart's not doing well. I'll be okay for now, but it made me realize how alone I really am, and how I keep putting off connection, like there's always more time. But there isn't." The vulnerability in his voice touched something in me. Not romantic, not yet, but human, deeply human. "I didn't expect any of this," I whispered. "Neither did I." We talked for hours. About work, about Kevin, about regrets and what it meant to grow older in a world that doesn't slow down for anyone. I saw sides of him I never knew existed, funny, sharp, deeply self-aware. I found myself laughing, really laughing, in a way I hadn't in weeks. At some point, he moved closer, not enough to crowd me, but enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. He reached for my hand, hesitated, then drew back. I didn't move away. "I know you're married," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, just as softly. We sat in silence again, but this time it was full of something new. An energy, a tension, not built on lust but understanding. Shared loneliness. A rare kind of emotional nakedness. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "Thank you," he said, "for listening, for being here." I nodded. "You're not as alone as you think, Martin." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I hope that's true." I stepped out into the night. The air was cool, the street quiet. But inside me, something had shifted. And I wasn't sure yet what it meant. The following days blurred into a gentle hum of routine. Kevin returned from his trip, unaware of the night I had spent in quiet conversation with his boss. I didn't keep it a secret to be dishonest, but because I didn't yet understand it myself. But Martin had stirred something in me, and that something wasn't finished yet. The days passed quietly, but my thoughts didn't. Martin's words clung to the edges of my mind like the scent of cologne on a scarf. Subtle, persistent. I'd find myself drifting back to that evening, the glow of the lamplight on his face, the way his voice cracked when he spoke of time slipping through his fingers. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Like I mattered. Like he wasn't used to being heard, and I had somehow given him that gift without knowing it. Kevin was his usual self, sweet, distracted, always chasing the next business deal, the next success. I didn't blame him. He was doing what he thought was best for us. But lately, our conversations had thinned out into grocery lists, dry jokes, and short kisses that tasted more of routine than romance. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when a message pinged on my phone. "Are you free this evening, Martin?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could ignore it. I could pretend that night was a one-time thing. But I didn't. "Yes," I replied. "After dinner." Kevin had plans to catch up with a colleague that night. As he kissed my cheek on the way out, I felt a flicker of guilt, but not the kind that comes from betrayal. More like a quiet ache, like something in me had been waiting too long to be seen clearly. I arrived at Martin's house around 7. This time, The front door was already open. I stepped inside without knocking. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up again, a pot of something simmering on the stove. "I made stew," he said, smiling without turning around. "Didn't know if you'd eat, but it felt like the right kind of night for it." The smell was warm and nostalgic. Carrots, onions, thyme. It reminded me of my mother's kitchen when I was little, when love was shown in full bowls and second servings. We ate at the dining table, quiet at first, then gradually more open. He asked me about my childhood, about my parents, my dreams before marriage and mortgages and menopause. I told him things I hadn't spoken aloud in years, about how I used to write poetry, about the watercolor set tucked away in the back of the closet, about the version of myself that had felt so alive at 25, and how I sometimes wondered where she had gone. "You didn't lose her," he said gently. "She's just been waiting for you to call her back." There was something deeply disarming about Martin, not just his kindness, but the way he saw me, without effort, without expectation. After dinner, we sat on the couch again, the same soft music playing low in the background. He poured us each a glass of wine, and the conversation turned inward once more. "I was married once," he said, swirling the glass slowly. "Long time ago. We were young, thought we had forever. Turns out forever was about 3 years and a lot of therapy." I smiled sadly. "You never remarried. Never found someone who made it worth the risk. Until—" He paused, catching himself, then smiled faintly. "Until I realized I'd stopped looking." The silence between us thickened. This time, it wasn't uncertain. It was charged. He reached for my hand again. This time, I didn't pull away. His fingers were warm, rough, steady. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he said. "You're not," I replied. And it was the truth. What was happening between us didn't feel like an affair. It wasn't reckless or hungry. It felt healing, like two people finding solace in each other's cracks. I leaned back against the couch, and he turned to face me fully, his gaze deep and unwavering. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "I just needed you to know that night changed something in me. I look forward to your presence in a way I haven't looked forward to much in years." My heart tightened, not with fear, but with something strangely close to relief, because I had felt it too, that shift, that quiet reawakening of something inside me that had long been sleeping. "You've changed something in me too," I said. His expression softened, and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. The gesture was tender, slow, almost reverent. "I just want to sit like this a little longer," he whispered. So we did. No rushing. No need to label the moment. Just two people in a room that no longer felt so quiet, wrapped in something we didn't fully understand, but didn't need to either. When I finally left, it was close to midnight. The air outside was cool again. My steps were slow, thoughtful. I felt awake. Kevin was asleep when I got home, the television still murmuring in the background. I turned it off, slipped under the sheets, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I wasn't thinking of leaving. I wasn't thinking of cheating. I was thinking of being, of feeling seen, of feeling whole, and of what it meant to rediscover yourself in the middle of your own life. And somewhere in the space between guilt and honesty, I knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. The next few weeks unfolded like pages in a book I hadn't meant to keep reading, but couldn't put down. Martin didn't reach out every day, but when he did, his messages always landed like gentle taps on the shoulder. Thoughtful, subtle, never demanding. I responded without hesitation, even when I told myself I shouldn't. It wasn't just his words. It was how he made me feel in their wake. Like I still mattered. Like I was more than someone's wife, more than someone's fading dream. Kevin remained unaware. He was busier than ever. Conference calls, late nights, networking dinners. We shared space, meals, a bed, but not much else. I don't blame him. Life had simply become a rhythm, and we were dancing just out of sync. One afternoon, Martin asked if I'd join him for a walk. "I'm tired of being indoors," his message read. "The park near the lake. Sunset. Just a walk." I hesitated, less out of concern and more because I knew what my answer meant. I was going, not to cheat, not to betray, but because I wanted to, because something about Martin stirred a version of myself that I didn't want to lose again. We met just as the sun was beginning to settle into the horizon. The sky was a mix of lavender and peach, the kind of sky that made you forget there were deadlines, bills, aging knees, and lost youth. He was already there when I arrived, standing by the bench with his hands in his pockets. He looked different outside of the house, more relaxed, more grounded. "I almost thought you wouldn't come," he said with a smile. "I almost didn't," I replied, returning it. "But I'm glad I did." We walked slowly along the path. The leaves rustled above us, and the air carried that earthy scent that comes just before autumn fully arrives. We didn't speak much at first, but it wasn't an empty silence. It felt like a quiet agreement to just be. He glanced over at me. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been if you'd taken a different road?" "All the time," I said, surprising even myself with the honesty. "Me too. But I never expected to feel this way again. Like I'm alive, not just breathing, but actually present." I stopped walking. He turned to face me. "Martin, I don't want to lead you on," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I'm not looking for an escape." "I know," he said, not missing a beat. "And I'm not asking you to." His gaze held mine with a quiet steadiness that made me want to cry. "I'm not chasing after something I can't have," he continued. "But you've reminded me that connection is possible. That something tender and meaningful doesn't have to be messy. It just is." We sat on a bench overlooking the water. The surface shimmered with the last bits of daylight. I haven't felt this scene in a long time, I confessed. With Kevin, it's not that he doesn't care. He just doesn't ask anymore about me, what I feel, what I miss, what I need. Martin didn't speak, but he reached over and placed his hand gently over mine. It wasn't a move of seduction. It was solidarity. "Sometimes," he said after a long pause, "we forget that even the people we love can vanish inside their own lives, and we forget to call them back." His words lingered. I thought about that on the drive home. How easy it is to become invisible in a relationship that once held so much brightness, and how powerful it is when someone sees you again. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Kevin sleep. I studied the lines on his face, the way his arm curled instinctively over the other pillow. I remembered the early days, how he used to write me notes and leave them in the kitchen, how his eyes lit up when I walked into the room. I missed that man, but I missed myself too. And Martin, he had reminded me of the woman I used to be before I forgot she was worth remembering. The next day, I woke up feeling lighter, more sure of my steps. I didn't message Martin. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to sit with my own thoughts for a while. I needed to figure out what this all meant, not just the nights and the conversations, but what it awakened in me. Days passed. Then one evening, Kevin came home early. He looked tired, the way people do when their days blur together. But he also looked at me, really looked, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting beside me on the couch. "About us?" My stomach tightened. "I know I've been distant," he admitted. I didn't realize how much until I saw your face last week. You were looking at your phone and smiling, and it wasn't for me." I froze. He didn't say it with anger, just sadness. "I'm not accusing you," he said quickly. I realized I haven't made you smile like that in a long time. And that's on me." A lump formed in my throat. I couldn't speak. "I miss us," he whispered, "and I want to find our way back. If you'll let me." I stared at him, torn between guilt and longing, because the truth was, I missed us too. But I wasn't sure if we were the same people anymore. Still, his words stirred something real. And now I had to decide what to do with it. With all of it. With Martin. With Kevin. With me. The next morning, the light filtered through the curtains differently. It was softer somehow, gentler, as if the day itself knew the weight of what I had to carry inside me. Kevin was already up, making coffee, humming a familiar tune we hadn't shared in ages. I stood quietly in the doorway, watching him move around the kitchen like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, at least for me. I poured myself a cup and sat down at the table. He smiled at me over his shoulder, that boyish, crooked smile I used to adore. "We should go somewhere," he said suddenly. "You and me. Just a weekend. No phones. No work. Just us." I wanted to say yes. I really did. But I hesitated. Because going away wouldn't fix the distance between us, and it wouldn't silence the voice in my head that still echoed Martin's words, or the way I had felt in his presence. After Kevin left for work, I found myself pacing the living room. I sat down, stood up, walked to the window, opened my messages, closed them, and then I picked up the phone. I didn't text. I called. Martin answered almost immediately. "Aye," he said, his voice warm and steady. "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again." "I wasn't sure either," I replied. There was a pause, a breath, space. "I need to see you," I said. "Come by," he said softly. I drove with the windows down. The breeze tangled my hair and cooled the nerves that buzzed beneath my skin. When I pulled into his driveway, he was already outside, standing at the edge of his porch like he'd been waiting for me all day. I stepped out, walked up the path, and before I could say anything, he opened his arms. I fell into them. He didn't kiss me. He didn't try to turn the moment into something physical. He just held me. And in that silence, I felt more understood than I had in years. "I talked to Kevin," I said finally, pulling back just enough to see his face. He nodded. "He wants to try again. Reconnect." Martin didn't flinch. He didn't look away. "Do you want that?" he asked gently. That was the question. The one I hadn't let myself ask. Did I want to go back to what we had, or was I just afraid to step into something new?